I've been following you and watching your work and really appreciating your iconography or your icon carving. What would that be
Yeah, well,
called?
yeah, you can call it iconography or icon
Iconography.
carving. It's fine.
And would you consider yourself a theologian as well, or a symbolist?
Hmm. I think symbolist is probably a better word.
Yeah.
The theologian, I don't think so, but I think that I could say that I've definitely one of the big things that let's say one of the missions of my life has been to rediscover the ancient symbolism that was found in Christian culture. And so for
Yeah.
sure that's been one of my main goals and try to reinvigorate it and
Mm.
make it accessible to people again.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I find about icons and mythology is that it speaks to a very almost immortal part of us, or almost a childlike, very basic, rudimentary part of us. It's almost a mathematics of the psyche in a way,
Yeah,
where
I agree.
it distills personalities and traits and psychic states into rudimentary symbols, and then uses rudimentary processes to kind of constellate those.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing the thing about religious symbolism in general is that the way it's structured, it's supposed to reach everybody. It's supposed to be able to be accessed by, the illiterate peasant as much as the doctor of theology. And so it's actually quite the simplicity of icons can be quite deceiving, because behind the simplicity is sometimes a very, very subtle language and very subtle references that the first glance won't let you see, but as you kind of dig into it, you realize that sometimes the shape of this object or let's say a certain detail in the icon is very specifically preserved through the centuries, and you wonder why is that preserved, and then you as you look into it, you realize that it's dealing with a very specific point. Let's say, for example, I wrote an article about a year ago, I think, on there's the icon of the Samaritan woman who meets Christ at the well, and in that icon, the well has certain shapes, and so there's three tradition of the shapes, and there's a circle, there's a cross, and there's a hexagon, and so and so I tried to show how this is extremely relevant, that you can find like the hexagon in the story of the Samaritan, and that the cross shape is because it's referring to a baptismal font, and so it's like you notice that these little details sometimes are extremely profound.
Yeah.
But not always. Sometimes details are details. Like
Yeah.
some people sometimes they overinterpret things too much. I've had crazy letters, people asking me like, what does this mean in the icon? And I'm like, well, it's not something, you're seeing something that's not relevant. You're looking at a detail too closely.
So there's an aesthetics or a form of artistry in the creation of icons, but also in their interpretation too. There's a balance to thread between overinterpretation and, I guess, underinterpretation.
Yeah. But
So-
it's also, you have to interpret it within the tradition. That's really the key.
Okay.
The key is to use, a traditional language. It interprets itself in the sense that it's like a mesh, okay? And
Yeah.
so the icon refers to scripture, and then scripture has stories which refer back to each other, and so those other places where they refer back to each other will then refer back to the icon, and then let's say the hymns in the church and the liturgy will refer to the icon, and the icon will refer to the liturgy. So there's this kind of interweaving of references which help you to move forward in your understanding. Usually when people go off is when they try to find some completely weird external thing that they kind of try to jam into the understanding of the icon. Like I had guy write me once, because icons have a certain aesthetic, let's say language, and certain forms that
syntax.
appear in the icon. Yeah, a certain syntax. And so someone said, he said, I don't understand. I'm trying to understand why in icons it looks as if the characters have their joints pulled out and they're disjointed.
Yeah, okay.
And then he was looking really, he's like trying to, I was like, that's not what it is.
Okay.
You're just not looking at it right. You're pushing something into the icon, which is nowhere else in tradition. No one ever talks about the idea of people being disjointed. It doesn't mean anything. It's like, try to look at it through the lens of the other things that you find. So that type of kind of overinterpretation happens all the time.
But does that necessarily mean that any given tradition is closed off, that it can't be added to, or that there can be more depth put in that still preserves or is integritous with regards to the rest of the tradition?
Yeah, I don't think, and yeah, of course, but I don't think that it's put in. I think that what happens is the idea of symbolic language is that it's sometimes these very simple things, and in those things there's like you can open them up, and then they become kind of these bottomless mazes that you can go into and find. But let's say the complexity is contained within the simplicity.
Yeah.
So you can always go further within the complexity which is contained in the simplicity.
Yeah.
So that you're kind of adding to the interpretation, but you're not going. But you have to stay within the frame, like you need to stay within the basic structures of a world, up, down, the basic left, right, these kind of basic let's say phenomenological categories that we live in.
Absolutely. Simplicity does not preclude subtlety.
No.
In a way.
No, and yeah,
it doesn't mean it's simplistic.
Yeah, and that's one of the things a lot of people struggle with. That's actually a big philosophical mistake that we see, especially in the atheists today, is they don't understand that the simple includes the complex, and it's not that the simple kind of stands above and beyond the complex, and that it's kind of like the complex is. So people will often, when they talk about God, they'll say something like, "How is it possible that the infinite, right, that the infinite God, the source of all being, can be outside the world, and how can ye answer your prayer?" And it's like, you're not understanding what that means, what the infinite and the simplicity of the kind of the infinite source of being contains within itself all complexity implicitly. So it doesn't have to explicitly contain it. It's like the concept of chair contains all the chairs.
Yeah.
Possible chairs within itself, within its simplicity.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to ask. It's in a way it's not like above the chairs and the chairs are below like all the chairs. It contains in itself the complexity.
Yeah. And and any given individual chair can still pray to chair. And chair will still listen.
And chair will still listen in its chairiness, like it'll be answered in its cherry qualities.
I've been listening to your discussion with Jordan Peterson last week. You guys, that was brilliant. It was a wonderful hour of my life spent repeatedly. And you brought up, I think in the beginning you brought up like the mystery of Christ as that which contains all categories and at the same time infuses all categories, or in the cross. So I wonder, is there not also a proper orientation toward mystery? Like mystery defies interpretation, or it's the variable that can never be cornered into specificity. How do we orient ourselves towards mystery, or include mystery in a way that's not improper, that doesn't spiral out of control?
No, I think we have to see the right way to understand mystery is to see the world coming out of mystery. We have to understand the idea that so imagine the best way to understand it is how a church works, let's say, okay? And so like an Orthodox church I'm going to speak in that terms because those are the terms that I exist in.
Yeah.
And so you have let's say the mystery would be hidden inside like the Eucharist, inside the chalice, on the altar, inside the holy space.
Okay.
And then the nave, and then the narthex. So there's a hierarchy which flows out of this impossible to contain mystery. And the impossible to contain mystery is not a physical thing. It's like it really is it's a mystery. It's kind of like the unsayable, the thing that cannot be said. And so you're always turning around the mystery. So the mystery acts as like, kind of Aristotle's, let's say this idea of the unmoving motor of the world or whatever, like the unmoving mover, right?
Yeah.
The principle around which all things start to revolve. And so as you describe, especially in symbolic language, as you describe things, what you're doing is you're always kind of turning around the mystery.
Yeah.
You're kind of talking about it, pointing to things, but you never are able to actually speak directly of whatever it is that you're turning around. And so that's kind of this idea that you respect the unfathomable, let's say, but then the world flows out of that unfathomable, right? So the world exists as you turn around this mystery, and so let's say like the church space is really kind of the best example. And so there is an unquantifiable thing, a logos, a something which brings us together. Okay. Well, think about it this way. Like, think about it in terms of a simpler, like, people, when you talk about religion, people like stop, their minds like shut off because for some reason they can't listen to that stuff. But think about, let's say, you're standing together around the flag, and so all these Americans are standing around the flag and they've got their hand on their shoulder and they're reciting, the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? And so it's like, are they really pledging allegiance to the flag, like to the physical object? Well, no, obviously not. Are they really pledging allegiance to the ideal flag, like this kind of the idea of the flag? Well, not even that. What exactly are they pledging allegiance to? As you kind of move in, you're going to find that thing that unites them becomes harder and harder to explicitly define. Becomes more and more mysterious as this kind of, let's say, secret or invisible thing which unites them as something, as a country, as a people. It's
the baseline that provides definition for that which they are.
But it's you can't completely say it. You kind of have to turn around it, and so you say the flag, and so you say, and so then you have these rituals or these coming together which turn around that mystery and point to it. But you can never totally get to it completely.
So with regards to the metaphor of the church and the space in the church, and you began with the Eucharist, which is entirely unfathomable, but it's tasty, and then you sit and it's held in a container, and then there's various containers. I wonder in a certain way if the mystery itself is not definable in itself, but within every given context, it scales to fill up and to define any given station of what's oriented around it.
That's a good idea. That's a good way to present it. And I think that, let's say the danger of idolatry is to confuse the process by which you move into the mystery with the thing itself, right? That's what idolatry is to think that it's completely contained. And so that's been, like, some of the dangers, let's say, that we've seen in the 20th century, let's say like communism or fascism. There has been that danger of trying to completely quantify the mystery or completely make it in the world. And so it's like trying to create a utopian thing like that you can quantify and you can measure. And that's the worst thing. Like you have to turn around the mystery, or else the world's going to be destroyed. Like you can't make an idol out of this mystery.
Well, there's still an improper mystery or a destructive way of mystifying or obfuscating an ideal. And I was thinking today on my drive about the mythology of intersectionality, or the mythology of social justice. And I've been studying social justice and intersectionality, especially in colleges, and deconstructing their language and reinterpreting what they say on the surface, because there's always something underneath the surface. But I'm thinking, well, you have to be able to contain it within a basic mythological structure. I think last in the discussion with Jordan Peterson, you guys talked about the hero. And I do think that there is a heroic arc or a heroic character within social justice and intersectionality, where whoever is the proponent of that is representing a group. Now, the group did not elect them, but they're on behalf of the downtrodden, or it's basically very similar to Christianity, where they're trying to act on behalf of the least of everybody else, and they're claiming a representation for all these groups, and then within any given one of their words, they have these terms like problematic or colonialization or equity. the term itself isn't specific. You can't really say this is what you mean by problematic or this is what you mean by toxic, because it's this network. It's a phrase that represents this whole meshwork that isn't stable. And I was thinking maybe they have somehow structured, or postmodernism somehow tries to create a stability out of chaos by stacking up representations of representations of representations, which is an inefficient way of going about the mystical.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've noticed about kind of like the social justice crew or the social is that the one thing for sure that I've seen is that they're bringing back the idea of a hierarchy, right? They're bringing back the idea of a kind of, but they're doing it. It's kind of like it's a weird upside down hierarchy. It's like it's like exchanging the center for the exception.
Yes,
and that's
absolutely.
really very fascinating. Like, it's very strange to watch that happen.
Instead of the individual, there's an identity or a collection of identities. So it's a weird semblance of the individual, but you never have like that one unique, volitional, responsible character. You just have like this somebody who acts on behalf of all these categories that they belong to.
Yeah.
There's no center there in a weird way, and it's reflected in their language. It's reflected in how they prosecute other people by kind of stringing them up in this like always. Well, at the same time, they are always on the verge of calling whoever disagrees with them a Nazi. So they do have a Satan, they do have a Hitler to like is the one solid thing around which they don't want to orbit. But there's no like Christ figure. Wouldn't the Christ figure be the person who can accumulate the most like categories of oppression? Let's say, like that someone who could, let's say, like if there was like you have this ideal person that has all the categories of oppression, who's a minority, who's maybe handicapped, who has an untraditional sexual identity or whatever, that they could kind of just that they would be like this kind of avatar of the emperor of SJWs would be that person that has all the points, like all the points together. But no, I've actually that like explicitly that has happened at Evergreen, the college.
Really? But wait, I have a question though. Were you there during the whole Brett stuff, like the Brett Weinstein stuff?
I was on campus. You were
studying there.
Yeah, I just graduated in June.
Wow.
So I saw the build-up, and I was worried about where it was headed. I saw where it was headed. And so what I've been doing on YouTube is just going back through and showing video and email evidence of this whole ideology. While it was manifested by the students, it was indoctrinated by the faculty and the staff and the admin. So
were you one of Brett's students, or?
No, I didn't meet him till after he got famous or infamous or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever. Right.
Yeah. No, I was a humanities major. I didn't cross the picket line of STEM humanity or that fjord.
Well, one of the things that I've been kind of talking about is this idea. I don't know. I did this talk in Vancouver. Did you see? I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Did a talk, right? So the idea I've been trying to bring about is this idea of the inverse hierarchy, of the upside down hierarchy, as kind of like the last step in a society or in identity. So to me, it seems like this coming about of this upside down hierarchy seems to be a sign that something's not going, like that we're running out of gas. Like this whole idea, like the whole, let's say, narrative of emancipation is coming to. It's like.
Are you talking about like the Enlightenment narrative?
Yeah.
That arc.
That whole arc.
From Protestant, I guess, from Martin Luther tacking like these 20 things onto a door.
Right. Yeah, the whole thing, like from even, I would say even starting before that, even starting in the Renaissance maybe. Like the whole arc of emancipation, it's reaching its kind of its end, let's say, and it's turning into this strange like upside down hierarchy of a capacity to be. It's like this. The process of emancipation leads to this imaginary, SJW emperor of all the categories of oppression. That person will be like, the. But so I don't know. That's kind of how I see what's happening for sure.
The problem with because there are a number of those perfect coalescence of all these different oppression categories at Evergreen. But the thing is about when you overlay it on the Christ arc, or when you overlay it on the hero, it's like, how do they actually redeem anybody? They don't. They just start calling out everybody. They just start assigning blame. It's weird, and everybody's mired in this privilege and this guilt from which there is no release. There's all this original sin, but there's no re-origination of purity or
but also
salvation.
The thing that's the thing about the emancipation arc, let's say, and I need to be clear, like, there's nothing wrong with emancipation in itself. There are some moments where you have to be emancipated if you're, like, it's not bad in itself, but the idea of emancipation is that I have to be emancipated from you. Right, that's the whole point of emancipation. Whereas let's say the Christian arc is that I have to take the sin of the world on my shoulders, take it on myself, and in a way I need to be emancipated from my own passions. That's very different than saying you're like, the bad guy is inside me, is all my all the things that are ripping me apart, all my thoughts, all my sins, all that stuff, and I need to be freed from that. Whereas now it's like, I need to be emancipated from all you guys who are bad, and unless I can somehow place myself in alliance with those who are not emancipated or trying to be emancipated, then I'm okay. But if I somehow fall on the side of those that are emancipated, or that are the oppressors or whatever, then it's bad news, And so I think that's really like it's a huge difference, because one happens internally and one happens as a fighting something that's outside of ourselves.
At Evergreen, they teach this stuff called anti-oppression. They have these workshops, which are basically privilege workshops. You figure out how much privilege points you have, and then that forms the hierarchy. And I had to go through a few of these workshops, and I noticed that the one thing that anti-oppression requires in order to function is oppression. And so if there's no obvious oppression, they have to invent oppression. So they create micro-oppressions and pico-oppressions, and then subatomic oppressions.
Pico?
It gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
And then subatomic oppression, I love that.
We're awash in a sea of oppression.
The best one I've heard recently, it was actually in a whole other context, but I thought, like, this is really like the pinnacle of this upside down hierarchy. I heard Thomas Metzinger on Sam Harris speaking about the bias of existence bias. I thought, dude, you've come to the singularity. And then that brought him to a whole antinatalist argument, talking about how it's probably like suggesting this idea, trying not to take it completely on himself, but kind of bringing in the idea that maybe all life should be eliminated, because in the end existence is suffering, and a being cannot suffer from its non-existence. And so it's like, there you go, you've reached the top, my friend. You've won the existence bias. I love it.
That's the most explicit version of nihilism that you can come up with.
Exactly.
That we need to destroy all life. That energy itself is suffering, so we need to nullify it in a way. The thing is that why is it so? The problem that I'm wrestling with is, how do we provide tools of resistance, and not just to perpetuate this cycle of argument and againstness, or how do we emancipate ourselves from SJWs? Is there not a better, more creative, more productive kind of mythology that we can disseminate that will help people act in a way for justice, for equality, for all these virtues, in a way that doesn't end up doing the opposite of what they state? Instead of like claiming diversity and then squashing all diversity, claiming inclusion and being incredibly exclusive, how do we unflip the upside down world?
That's the trick. Well, I think that for sure I think that laughter is part of it. That's definitely part of it. I think that when we're seeing it happening, like the idea of bringing laughter back, because the radical, let's say the radical SJWs had no sense of humor. Right, there's none, like, because they're so explicitly, the world is like this, it's square. They're Puritans, really. They're like the new Puritans.
Yeah.
And so laughter is a really good tool to kind of start to bring things back. And so that's why these new media, kind of weird new media characters are often kind of comedic and I think they kind of make fun of the social justice people. That's fine, but it can't stop there. It can't just be making fun of kind of the social justice extreme. There has to be I kind of use this image. This is the image I've been using, is the idea of kind of diving into the waters, of diving into the chaos and then trying to find the central thing, like trying to find, let's say, the I call it, the golden spark or the golden ball or the golden, that is kind of like let's say the main thing of Western civilization. Like, what is that? I mean, obviously in my own life, what I've been doing is trying to go back into the Christian symbolic language and trying to explore it, trying to restore it, trying to find ways to communicate it so that it becomes again a language for us to be able to use in which to exist, let's say. So rediscovering that language, that has been like my kind of way to want to deal with it. I think that for sure the solution has to be kind of a spiritual one first.
Well, could you define what you mean by spiritual?
Well, it has to be something which is beyond, let's say, the politics, beyond the rhetoric. It has to be something that brings everything together.
Okay, some transcendent.
Yeah, it has to be something which kind of transcends the opposite, so that the opposite. And yet,
isn't utopia? Utopia is a form of.
No, because utopia is in the world.
Huh.
The problem of utopia is that it tries to take one side. Let's say you have a transcendent ideal, okay, and then you have God. They start at the beginning of Genesis. Okay, God creates heaven and earth. So you have a transcendent thing. Yeah. Then you have two opposites that are like the two pillars of existence, yin and yin yang, whatever how you want to see it, heaven and earth. So you have these two opposites. Now utopia, what utopia is when you try to manifest just one.
Okay.
Like you try to manifest just heaven or just earth, and that's why, for example, the utopias of the 20th century were so extremely opposite. You had this crazy orderly hierarchy where everything has its role, its place in the hierarchy, and everything is structured vertically like this. And that was, let's say the Nazi regime.
Okay.
And then you have another utopia, which is like completely flat and no hierarchy. Everything there's no outside, no boundary, and that's like the communist utopia. And so the utopias are usually trying to pull things on one side of the opposite. And you see that like in the dialectical thinking of the Frankfurt School and in like of the modern thinkers, this idea of like that the dialectic at some point has to destroy the other side. Like basically the fight has to go on until one side basically destroys the other side.
Yeah.
Whereas a traditional way of seeing the world is that's not going to happen.
Yeah. This
pendulum is always going to swing. So you actually need to there's this beautiful quote by Rumi where he says that I forget, it's going to be a paraphrase, but it's something about how it's not about just keeping the hand open or keeping the hand closed. Both of those are paralyzing, but it's about the so gentle opening and closing, like the wings of a butterfly.
Yeah.
And so this beautiful idea of a sway between the two sides, let's say, kind of normal sway between more leftish and more right thinking, or heaven and earth, or however you wanted to define the two opposites, so that you don't pull it so far that just comes crashing back.
And the thing is with something like that, with a balance or a dance of that sort, that replicates it, at least abstractly, that would replicate actually life itself, which is ever changing, which is ever ebbing and flowing and stuff. Instead of saying this is what we're going to impose, this one thing on life, in and of itself can't. That's not what life is.
Yeah, but you could see it as walking. You can see it as walking. There's something which holds your balance.
Yeah.
You have something. You have a vertical, a straight vertical, and then you have a left leg and a right leg, and you move like that. So you do need something which is kind of like the core.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can have this ebb and flow back and forth between these different tendencies. Obviously, it's in the world. It's a lot messier in the world. Things are a lot messier in the world, but I think that's really, to me, that's the only solution. I don't see anything else.
Well, if we include the messiness, I mean, yeah, we have to clean our room, but even there's an extreme of cleaning one's room, right?
Exactly.
Like the dust needs to collect. Messiness is good for creativity.
Yeah.
I mean, our dreams are not messy at all, and that's where a lot of our psychic life plays out.
Right.
So developing, I really think that social justice or any sort of totalitarianism it's an immaturity or an inability to face just primary uncomfortable facts of life, such as not being able to know, like being comfortable with ignorance, and therefore developing humility, right?
Yeah.
And developing the ability to rely on other people and rely on difference and even invite difference, because that's an expansion. Whereas social justice, right now, it seems like they're trying to deny all difference, and what they're going to end up doing is completely weakening themselves.
Right.
I think you brought that up. They're going to become so diffuse, so all-accepting, that they have nothing to stand on other than the fact that they need something to be against to completely define themselves.
Right. Well, it definitely seems to be the intersectional kind of, let's say, strategy. Is that they're united in what they're fighting, because there is no other world in which the LGBTQ agenda and the Muslim agenda fit together.
Yes.
Except in a world where you want to destroy, let's say, kind of Western Christianity, because those two things don't fit together at all.
Yeah, but the enemy of their enemy causes them to be
right.
very.
That seems to be what's happening, but it's not going to end well. If they win, then it'll be.
Well, then they're just gonna go after each other. I was thinking about like what you said, like diving into the surface, or diving underneath the surface and going through the water, wrestling with the sea to find the pearl at the bottom. And one of the ways that I think social justice, or whatever it is very attractive, is because you don't have to find your unique purpose now. You get to sacrifice your unique purpose, and going through the dark night of the soul, which is terrifying, which is completely lonely. Instead of doing that, you get to huddle around this warm fire. Actually, it's a blazing fire of hatred or whatever. But in a sense, we're called to go on that inside journey. And with the social justice rubric, not only do you have community ready built. I mean, it's ramshackle, but you have a cause, you have a purpose. When you step away from community, you have to confront failure. Whereas if you're in a group that constantly redefines their failures as successes, which I've seen at Evergreen and a lot of these other places, where they say, no, all of our critics are neo-Nazis, we didn't fail at all, we actually succeeded in what we meant to do the whole time. So it saves you from having to go confront actual failure. Like any sort of artistic endeavor or business endeavor or any sort of entrepreneurial unique endeavor is going to require one to confront failure and actually to die, in a way, to die to your ideals, to die to your ego, to go through a series of deaths, which you're kind of rescued from even going in that direction.
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, it's hard to know. I think it's weird because the thing that I keep telling people, the thing that I'm most afraid of is not so much the social justice people. Like, I am afraid. I think that it's what they're doing is crazy, but I really feel like they're calling the devil. Like they're invoking their enemy, and they're trying to get their enemy to manifest itself.
Being
it's been really,
white nationalism.
Yeah. It's been really weird, For example, like if you look at, let's say some of the enemies of the social justice warriors, like the more right-leaning type people, it's been strange how they're being shut down completely. Okay, so let's say someone like Milo, they're trying to shut him down. They ban him from Twitter. They ban him from. They try to ban him from any talking anywhere. But then for some reason, Richard Spencer is all over the place. He's being interviewed here. He has a feature in the Atlantic. He's interviewed on television all the time. I have one of my Twitter accounts is for this Orthodox Art Journal that we run. Yeah. and we don't follow anybody except for a few Orthodox institutions. And for a while, in every single one of the Twitter notifications I got, there was a Richard Spencer tweet. It's like, how is that even possible? I don't even follow Richard Spencer. I don't follow anybody who follows Richard Spencer. Why is the first tweet that appears like as the title of my tweet, it's a Richard Spencer tweet? I was like, there's something very, very disturbing going on. It's as if they want there to be Nazis. Like they do everything doing everything they can for the Nazis to be right there at the forefront, or the more radical. Let's say the more radical they can find of these kind of white nationalist types. To be at the forefront, whereas those that are, let's say, someone like Ben Shapiro, who's obviously not a Nazi, like he can't speak. Like we don't want him to speak. We're gonna ride. We're gonna do whatever we can to stop him from speaking. Well, it's very disturbing.
There's a weird tension too in the methodology where at this point they call every white person as a white supremacist. Basically, every white person isn't just implicitly biased and implicitly racist, but they're actually a supremacist, and all ideals of Western society are supremacist. So they defined everything as their enemy, but they still need the very particular, very explicit enemy at the same time.
So what do the white people do? Like, because so all the white SJWs, like, how do they deal with that? Because I've seen it on Twitter. Like, I've seen white people tweet things like, I hate all white people, and it's like, I don't understand that. I don't know how that works, because why don't you kill yourself then? I don't get it.
It's
so
like
how does it work? Like but you've seen it in person, I guess. Like, how does that work?
Well, it's like the male feminist who goes around telling everybody that men should shut up and listen. It's like, then shut up. Well, no, not me. I need you to shut up. Yeah,
exactly.
It's fascinating. I was in my last class at Evergreen. It was incredibly radical. It was just a 4-credit class about performance and poetic performance, and the first day of class we ran around and introduced ourselves, and everybody had a they. Everybody was they. I was among the them. I'm like, oh no, like where are we going? And which is fine. Actually, I don't know. I don't want to get into the conversation. But
so nobody had a him or her pronoun?
Well, the girls would like to be I'm a she or a they, so they're kind of having their, I'm a that phase kind of thing.
Because it's still okay to be she.
Yeah, she's okay,
but it's better to be they.
Yeah, it's better to be they.
So to figure that out, right?
You're more diffuse.
Figure that out, that conflict out in your mind there.
But
not a him. So the men would say I'm they.
I guess there was a couple he's. Okay. There was a couple he's, but almost everybody was they. I'm not even gonna say. I'm here. I'm seeking the way to create something awesome. That's why I'm here. I'm not going to frame it on my identity. I'm going to frame it on what I'm trying to do. But after the protests happened, we had a class, and it was horrific. It was a struggle session where 3 people of color berated the rest of the class for being white. They yelled at us for our white silence. Our silence was literally killing them. And then when somebody's like, "Well, what do you mean?" They're like, "Shut up." Shut up. And they're like, "Wait, do you want me to talk or be quiet?" And they're like, "Shut up." And then this girl started crying. She's like, I don't understand how I can do both of those things at once. And they started laughing at her. Right. So they were insatiable in that viciousness. And at the end of that session, they were talking about this plan to go after the board of trustees. They're going to change the whole institution. I'm like, well, maybe you guys want to like refine your performance. Maybe think about how you're going to present your ideas, because it might have better traction if you took a different tact. And right away, I was snapped at by this white girl next to me. She's like, "They don't need your criticism." I'm like, well, they do though, and we're in a college, right? But they don't want that. They want all affirmation. So what I've seen happen with people in that class is that in the beginning of class they were goofy and weird and eccentric, and they're writing crazy poetry and stuff. But after that, the protest happened, that sense of wonder and openness was shut down, and I saw a bunch of eyes just saying, just saying, I'm here to protect this person, and I'm
Right.
going to go and police everybody else to protect this person.
Wow.
And that sense of creativity and expansion was gone. That was the most horrific thing
Well, yeah.
about the whole
It's
incident.
weird because when I was studying on my own or in college or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I always wondered, like I would read about the French Revolution, and I would read, let's say, about the Russian Revolution,
Yeah.
and I couldn't understand. I said, how does it happen? Like, how do normal people, let's say, go out into the street and start, slaughtering innocent women? Like, how do they guillotine, their neighbor? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And so it's crazy that you were there and saw that process. I mean, obviously it didn't go to that, let's not exaggerate, but it's like the process is there.
It could have.
Right,
Like there's
one step before
Yeah.
they feel justified in doing anything.
Well, it's not just justification. Like, it's never enough. It's never enough.
Yeah.
That's why it goes to violence eventually. Because they're still there. They still exist. We need to. If we kill them, then maybe the white supremacy will be dead. If we kill the president or something. And it didn't get up to that point.
Yeah.
But it was very analogous. It was very close.
Wow.
So it just, at Evergreen specifically, and I think it has to do with the educational system. I think that young people nowadays are being incredibly disserviced with regards to how to think for themselves. So they come to college unable to turn ideas in different ways, unable to see disagreement or to delight in the tension of refining things, right? Going through a process of reaching the truth. Like, no, everything's packaged. I need to say the truth, get a bunch of Facebook posts, and I'm good. And I'm just going to replicate that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then on top of that is the hierarchy of like what the teachers are instilling. This postmodern pseudo-communist stuff like that.
Wow. What's interesting, I mean, what's interesting is that we're seeing now kind of the result of it, like this Hollywood, you see Hollywood falling apart. It's really fascinating to watch because what you're seeing is a place, an industry, let's say a voice that's been around for 100 years or whatever, but for the past, let's say since the 60s at least, has been more and more vocal and kind of signaling their virtuous position, like being on the right side of history and being and taking that kind of emancipation narrative to its limit. And now, like you talked about this idea, you just need to say this. If you say this, then you're fine. But now all the hypocrisy underneath, like all the fact that the male feminist, like the weaselly, the weasel male feminist, and all that, that's what you say, but and the kind of the disjointed and the cognitive dissonance that they must live in, And I really think, like I was telling this to someone this morning. I think that Weinstein,
I think Weinstein,
Weinstein. Let's not confuse those.
There's Weinstein's law and then Weinstein's law. Let's
not confuse those two laws. All right, that's good. Let's say Weinstein. Okay, I think that Weinstein, someone like him, he's actually surprised that he's being accused. He's in such cognitive dissonance that he actually thinks that he is that virtuous guy who made all those movies with Quentin Tarantino about minorities getting back at their oppressor and all that stuff. And so he really thinks that he's the hero, and I'm sure that he's totally can't see his own cognitive dissonance. I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah.
That's the sadness about that.
Well, the end game is complete confusion. I'm toying with this idea that and I wonder what you think about this, because so you have like a tradition that you work with. You work with Greek Orthodox Christianity, basically. That's kind of like the domain in which you travel. And I've been thinking about how, like, when they teach writers how to write a story, like, it has to have conflict. We always have to have conflict. And I wonder if, in a certain respect, like, our society has enshrined conflict narrative to its utter extent, that there's always going to be a conflict. And I wonder, is there a narrative that we can pay attention to that, instead of being all about conflict, goes from conflict into harmony? Or is there a story about harmony, or is there no such thing?
No, but I think that most of the, if you follow, let's say, if you read hagiography, if you read the stories of the saints, that's exactly what you'll find all the time. Is you find the story of conflict, inner conflict, sometimes outer conflict, but then usually it comes inside, and then that
it's transmuted in a way.
Right, it's transformed into into like the divine vision, or the beatific vision, or or in Orthodox we don't use those words exactly. We talk more about Hezekiah, like the reaching of stillness, the reaching of silence, the reaching of the still center, like coming into your heart and being united with God and being transformed. And so obviously that narrative is there, but it has to go through struggle to kind of reach that point. But it has to kind of turn inside, or else what's the point? I mean, even if you read the church fathers, when they read, let's say, the stories in the Old Testament that is all war and conflict, they say, no, you need to read that as a metaphor or as an image of the internal conflict. Okay? It doesn't mean it's not saying things about the external world. It is, of course. But I mean, for it to be useful for you, you have to be able to see it as this internal battle that you're waging. It's kind of like, I mean, you see that in the Bhagavad Gita, and you see it in other traditions too, where it's like this image of conflict, has to be taken inside, and you see it as this internal thing. I think that that's really the way to, and I think that that's, for example, that's what Jordan Peterson has been trying to get people to do, is to enter that inner conflict and kind of fight yourself. If you're going to fight your own demons, and then you'll see you'll become something that people admire and people want to kind of to be with and to follow. And
so I wonder if the threshold that's not being breached is that the taking all that external conflict and transmuting it into a personal struggle that's not dependent on a outside oppressor constantly, but can succeed to say, okay, the outer oppressor of me and my clan is actually the lesser oppressor. The greater oppressor is on the inside, and if I can master that, then I can turn around and master the world. It seems like that process is hitched, or like it's broken. It's not going into that maturation or that abstraction.
But one of the things that makes it broken is that the whole narrative is based on rights. It's based exclusively on rights instead of being based on responsibility, right? And so if you read, for example, the traditional way, let's say, of talking about inequality in the world, let's say a prophet goes into a kingdom. The prophet doesn't go to the poor and ill-treated and say, you deserve better, stand up, kill the king, go fight. No, he goes to the king and says, you bastard, you have to take care of those people. Your responsibility is to take care of those that can't take care of themselves. Like, that's a whole different discourse. Is to be, instead of seeing yourself as someone who has rights, who's being beaten up by the outsiders, to see yourself as someone who can help those in need, that can help those in trouble, that can help those that have less than you. So if you act that way, and if people in society kind of take on that different vision of the world, then it's not, then you can bring it inside, right? Because you're always asking yourself, how am I not helping the poor? How am I not, being there for those that can't defend themselves? So I think it's a very different discourse. Like, the traditional discourse is very different.
Even in the stories of the prophets, like it's rare that a prophet hasn't been an outcast. Like, the prophet has his own arc where he has to leave the kingdom before he can speak the words. Whereas I think it's glamorous for us to think that I can just go up to the king and yell and tell him to change his ways if I haven't gone through the grueling process of being broken down into just the logos. Like, the prophet is somebody who can speak that word, and that word, even though it's similar to the false prophet, the word is similar on the outside. The content is truer for the one who's gone, into the belly of the well to go through the Jonas story.
The Jonas story. But and also there's something, I mean, obviously there's that crazy contradiction. I mean, and the crazy contradiction of the idea of someone who goes to Yale, who is at the same time an oppressed person. It's like, if you go to Yale, if you go to these elite colleges, you're obviously not like oppressed in reality. I mean, you're an elite, you're the elite of society. And to strangely, you can't be the elite and be the oppressed at the same time. It just doesn't work. You have to you have to find a way to manage that in yourself. It doesn't. So to see students who are accepted in these Ivy League schools who then talk about how unsafe they are and how oppressed they are, it's like, I don't care what group you're part of. It's like, you're the elite. That's what you are.
but they're in a way. I don't know. I think that might have to do with the way that education is set up now. Is it's no longer a process of refinement. Education itself is no longer meeting the waves, diving into it, going through years and years of just getting down to finally you got your one mastery, right?
Yeah,
Instead,
getting your thoughts broken up. Like, I had to go through it. Why is it that, like, I grew up a Christian, and when I got to university, like, I got bad, like, I got you get beaten up, you get knocked down by your philosophy professors. Like, they just put all the challenges in front of you, and then it kind of comes to a point where it's going to break, and then it's like, okay, I need to work through this. You work through it, and you work through it. It's like, it should be like that for everyone. It shouldn't be that you're just bashing one side and the other side doesn't need even to argue and is just taken for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just nuts.
Well,
it creates such fragility on the other side that it's not going to hold.
It's not going to hold.
It's going to break apart when they have to face reality. It's going to break. Yeah,
when you're handed that pearl of high cost, it's no longer a pearl of high cost. Like, unless you went on that journey, it's no longer gonna be your pearl. It's gonna be the false gold in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a plastic pearl. You just don't know.
Right. Yeah,
They haven't taught you how to differentiate it. I can give you a plastic pearl and you wouldn't know the difference because I haven't taught you how to tell the difference between the plastic one and the real one.
Well, the difference is oppression, because that's a capitalistic kind of evaluation scheme.
That's hilarious. There is no qualitative difference between the plastic one and the real one because capitalism.
You brought up form and structure or order. We were dancing around order, and in my own artistic development, at least at Evergreen, I've been working on trying to be a writer and trying to create stories, and I was attracted to poetry. And I didn't know why I was attracted to poetry, but when I started studying poetry or modern poetry, it's very formless. It's very like almost anti-form, and there's very weird, loose metrical structures maybe, and no rhyming. You're not supposed to rhyme at all.
Yeah.
And when I was working on my senior project, and I started to rhyme. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't help it. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to rhyme, And as I went on with the project, I'm like, well, rhyming's not enough. I need to go with meter, Mm-hmm. So I started playing with very, very strict formal guidelines within the art, and it opened up an entire world of a deeper level of interacting with my own creativity, because my executive functions were concentrating on the surface, and then whatever was underneath that rose up and filled up the structure.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I felt like artists nowadays are taught to despise form. You don't need form at all. You can paint a toilet gold and call that art. And I think that's it's a cop-out in a way. It's anti-elitist, but it's still, elitism still comes back up in that, because anything that rhymes within at least poetry is looked down on and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you've gone through, because iconography is incredibly formal.
Yeah.
Right. So is there a discourse between that form and then like the inner content, or like the emergence of something unexpected out of that which is projected or expected for you?
Well, the importance, I think that one of the importance is not to be nostalgic. I think it's important not. I have this phrase that I use, which is tradition without nostalgia. That is it's hard because I don't know anything about poetry, so I can't. What I'm going to say is going to be based on what I'm doing, which is visual art.
Yes.
And so for me, one of the keys has been to look lower, to find a ground, right? To find the anchor. And so if I make an icon, let's say, I make it for someone. So someone will commission the icon,
Okay.
right, for their life, for their prayer life, for their church. And so we're in a relationship. We talk about their need, and then I have the skill. I have the skill and the knowledge in terms of form and in terms of symbolism. They have the need, and so we try to meet somewhere in the middle. And then I create this thing. I give it to that person, and then that thing enters into a community, into the life of a family, into the life of a person. Okay, and so to me so now form serves purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, because if, let's say, I'm going to make an image which is going to participate in someone's prayer life. Okay, I need to make it in a way that they will recognize it as theirs, recognize it as part of their community, right?
Yeah.
I need to make it in a way that will not have certain aspects of it call so much attention to themselves that they distract from the main purpose of the object, okay? And so those are so the form follows function, I guess, right? And so now within that I have my frame.
Yeah.
And then I use my traditional knowledge, and then the traditional language has been developed within that context, right? Within the context of creating these images which participate in the community, and then within that there are sometimes, let's say, some unexpected. There's like a unexpected, or there's the possibility of pulling in threads from modern painting or even postmodern painting. It's possible to pull those things in, or certain tropes that come from, let's say, movie culture, or that come from photography. Like, there's little tropes, but it always has to kind of be a spice, let's say, a spice which is an ornament, or a spice which doesn't call so much attention to itself that it destroys the purpose of the object. And so there's that ebb and flow, that kind of gentle ebb and flow that we talked about before, where you're able to kind of play with things, but you never go too far because you're making this for someone. And so you're not just making it, just because you want to, or out of your own, little whims.
The anchor point is based in the real world, insofar as the real world is another person, or or
is a community. In the sense of an icon, it's really the community of the church in general, and a specific person in particular, let's say. And so to me, that's been kind of like the saving thing in terms of making art, because it's been what has brought me back into art. Because I studied contemporary art, and I thought I was going to be a contemporary artist, but I became so disillusioned with how it works, and also, well, first of all, I realized that even in contemporary art, form follows function, right? And so that the function of contemporary art, there's a few functions. One is to be an image of the kind of fragmentation and nihilism that society is in terms of a message, and then in terms of function in society, the only thing left for contemporary art is to be objects of prestige and objects of exchange. Right. And so those are the only real. And so if, let's say myself coming in as someone who's a Christian, and trying to make contemporary art, it doesn't work, because what I'm trying to do, that's not what I'm trying to do. I don't want to be ironic constantly, like irony upon irony upon irony, and kind of like have comment upon comment upon comment upon comment that is so like idiosyncratic that I'm completely, at the other end of the, that I'm on the edge of the world, teetering and going to fall into the void, right? And so I want to talk about things directly. You can't do that in contemporary art. You can't. You have to be ironic. You have to be at least one few steps removed from it has to be a comment on something. A comment on painting. You can't paint anymore. You can only make a comment on a comment on a comment on painting. Okay. So then I couldn't do it because that's not who I was, and that's not
too
what
much
I wanted
blather.
Yeah. So all I could do, I finally just destroyed all my art, and it was weird. It was like the subject of my contemporary art. That's what it was. The subject of my contemporary art is, how can someone who wants to speak directly do so in contemporary art? And so it's like my paintings were about that. So I wasn't escaping my own dilemma. It's like I'm not going to spend my life making comments on how someone can maybe speak directly in art. It's like that's another baloney thing. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
And so discovering kind of medieval art and iconography, and discovering how that art could be integrated into an actual community, which has a breathing life, then it's like, dude, that's it. I've got it. Like this is the way to kind of engage with the world. And so and so then now, once that I've discovered that language and kind of been immersed in that language, now I think it's possible to use that language to push further, to create, let's say, works of art which could be a bit more out there, let's say novels or even movies or things that are more on the entertainment side of culture, but that still remember or kind of point back to the more anchored, participative culture, let's say.
Yeah. In a way, the religious traditions are the multimedia. They're multimedia. They have sound and light and buildings and shapes and painting and gestures and dance. Like they incorporate the entire human experience. And
but more importantly, they're not spectator. They're not purely spectator art, because the we've come to a point, like with Kant and with the idea of aesthetics, we've come to the idea of art as something you simply gaze at.
Yes.
That you look at, or that you listen to.
Or consume.
You sit in a concert hall, you consume. You sit in a concert hall and you listen to music. Yeah. Well, the idea of sitting in a concert hall and listening to music is extremely recent. Before, music was also always part of something, part of a festival, part of a wedding, part of liturgy, part of it was part of a meeting at the King's Court or something, or praising some battle or something. So it was participating in the culture. It wasn't a spectator thing. Mm-hmm. And the same that's why icons aren't spectator. They're not, people use them in their prayer life. Like people don't just look at them and look at how pretty they are.
Okay.
Like they'll bow to them, they kiss them, they light candles, it's like it's all part. It becomes part of the community.
In a sense, the spectatorism, or that aesthetic removal of consumption, eventually place the artist as that which is the spectacle. This ego that
that's also part of it.
Lands and reflects on it. It added that into the mix instead of the artist being kind of anonymous, or somebody who's the purveyor of, or the servant of. The community
of the ideal, or the community of the purpose, let's say. And so, like, I always tell people, like, even theater, people have this idea that we have this idea of theater, but if you look at the Greek playwrights, they wrote their plays in the festival of Dionysus.
Yeah.
And before the play, there was a sacrifice, and the plays had a certain structure. Like they had, there was 3 dramas and a farce, and so it followed the line of Dionysus, like this kind of crazy, tragic, let's say, this kind of moment of these contradictions, like these contradictions which end in a contradiction, but a contradiction which is a farce. Let's say it's like the last laugh, let's say, of Dionysus. And so the drunken laugh, we could call it that. Like it's like the drunken laugh of Dionysus always ended the structure. And so we even theater had a sacred origin, even though in the Greek time it was getting to be more of a spectator sport, and then after the Greeks, then maybe that's what it became later.
Romans,
But in the basic idea of what it was, it was a sacred thing. It was part of a sacred festival.
So I wonder, in your idea of like the end of, or we're at the end of the emancipation narrative, if there's a drunken laughter of Dionysus, or
that's right. That's what
we've entered the farce phase where everybody's just like drinking and big orgies everywhere.
And the dregs are right there. Like, we're right in the dregs right now.
More yeast than alcohol, even.
That's right.
Just like swirling through.
And yeast is perfect, because yeast is like a monster. It's like this living monster. It's like this kind of weird parasite thing. So it's like that symbolism is really important.
It's just eating itself.
That's where we are. And the sadly is that like I said, I keep saying, like, the scary thing is that sometimes, not necessarily, but sometimes after that comes the sword too. Like it vacillates between the two. there's a moment where the margin wins, and that's like the story of the Baki, let's say. But then there's also a moment where the tyrant comes back in full force, and then chops things down. So it's like those two things are right on the horizon. We're kind of seeing those two things bubbling at the same time. You can see the drunken laughter a lot more because it seems like that's more where we are. But I keep telling people, like, we're right at the spot they were in Weimar Germany. Like, we're right there, the same spot. And so that it didn't end well. And we have the risk of that's where it's going to go again. And the same thing is going to play itself out.
Yeah. Unless we can somehow shift our attention away from the mirage. In a way.
Find the core, find the yeah. So I mean, it's kind of sad that in a way you can't really offer social solutions anymore. I kind of try to like, you need to have a personal solution. You need to, it's like you yourself, your family, the people close to you, you can be something else. You can live a life of integrity and honor and be like some kind of beacon, I guess. But I don't know how many social solutions there are right now that won't just make things worse. I don't know.
Well, a community of individuals is probably a better society than a community of
mindless,
identity people.
Right.
Yeah, just a community of a bunch of categories, and said like, no, we're all individual. Yeah, let's not worry about the big picture. Let's worry about this picture first, and then let it go through from the Eucharist outward.
That's right.
Through the narthex and then into the street.
That's right. You got it. Yeah, it's the right way to see it.
Wow. Well, thanks, Jonathan. This is excellent. Do you have? Are you going on another tour anytime soon? Or are you?
I think I'm trying to. I need to carve. I'm a carver. It's like I'm not. I all of these talks and YouTube stuff has for the first time since I've been an icon carver, for the first time I have clients who are kind of getting impatient because they're waiting for their carvings. Yeah. So I need to get to that. I'm going to keep making my YouTube videos for sure because people are starting to support me on Patreon. Yeah. Like, people are excited, I'm excited about seeing how engaged the people who are watching my videos have been. Like, it's been so exciting for me. Like, long comments, people writing like really thought out, comments and engaging me, sometimes critiquing me, sometimes, coming on my side, but it's been pretty positive. Yeah. So I'm going to keep doing that. But for talking, I'm going to wait until spring, I think.
Good.
In spring, I'm going to do some tour in the South. Like, there's something getting set up. So hopefully that'll be fun. But for now,
you're going to be in your cov chipping away.
Yeah. But I'll still do the YouTube thing for sure. Yeah.
Well, excellent. Is there like an arc that you see developing in your YouTube activities?
Well, I think I'm going to keep hammering. I'm trying to show these structures. Like, I'm trying to show the symbolic structures. And so I'm vacillating between trying to show them outside in the world, let's say, to show them in popular culture, to show the structures in a political event and what's happening. But then come back to the more profound stories in the Bible and in the religious tradition, and show how they work themselves out in that world. That's one of the arcs. The other arc is helping people, more rational-minded people and the more scientific-minded people, help them see, how, let's say, the symbolic worldview and the scientific worldview, they can act as complements to each other, and that they're not necessarily in competition if they have the right relationship. Yeah. And that because sadly a lot of the could call them the critics or the skeptics on YouTube, they don't have no idea what they're talking about. And so they have very reasonable arguments to talk about. They're trying to figure things out in terms of politics and in terms of other things. But when they talk about religion, they just say, oh, stupid fairies and unicorns and Santa Claus. It's like, my goodness, it's embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself, buddy. I'm sorry, and so I'm trying to help communicate to a lot of those types of people, that if you look at it differently and you do it with honesty and without just bringing your kind of, your Dawkins cynicism in there. Yeah. Find there's a lot of powerful stuff in there. There are powerful structures and powerful like a symbolic algebra, which is underlying our perceptions of the world.
Yeah, the religion seems to be the one thing that you can feel smart being completely ignorant about.
Yeah.
Which,
but you hear people that are just smart. You hear them talk about anything else, and they're smart, and then they start talking about religion, and they become so snide and so sure of themselves.
Yeah.
And they can't fathom how someone who's smart could ever believe such nonsense. And you're thinking, my friend, you
yeah. Well,
it's like you're just not seeing it in the right frame. That's all.
In a sense, I think that the social justice or the Church of Intersectionality is the response to 3 or 4 generations without a coincident spiritual tradition.
Oh yeah. Totally.
So we've gotten away. We're a post-religious society, but religiosity is just in full bloom now.
Oh yeah.
And so a religion is something to help constellate these very fundamentalist urges that we have to be able to project onto the world a symbolic structure that actually is positive and not net dystopian.
Yeah, well, it's really fascinating. Like I follow. I don't know if there's that Real Peer Review on Twitter. I don't know if you have ever followed that.
Yeah.
So I follow them and I read these abstracts from the journals and everything, and it's really weird. It's really fascinating to see a kind of symbolic worldview come back, but totally upside down. Yeah. Like completely upside down. Yeah. And it's like. It's really fascinating. It's like if you could just turn it back on its feet.
Yeah,
and it would be a nice normalizing structure for a society. But it's so upside down that it's like there's no other word besides it's satanic.
Yeah,
like it's just satanic symbolism.
And the thing is I don't think you're going to be able to defeat it with rationality. Not logical rationality, but I think mythological rationality, or like I said at the beginning, the mathematics of the psyche, right? Of these different processes that humans go through that aren't they're not 1 + 1 = 2. They're a man, 1 woman, 3 children, and then they have weird interrelationships, and then it spirals into a mythology, a lore.
I saw one paper which was one of my favorite in terms of what it is. Like there's the traditional idea in terms of traditional ontology, this idea that, let's say, the masculine has the seed, right? So it's like you imagine like the masculine like plants a seed in the earth, and the earth would be the feminine, and then the feminine, will give the matter. Let's say will provide matter for the code, which is the seed, right, and the care, and then the tree will grow, right. So that's been like a traditional vision of the interaction between the masculine and the feminine. So even in terms of human sexuality, like the man leaves his seed in the woman, and then a child comes from that relationship.
It's not it's a tension, it's a polarity, but it's a fruitful polarity,
right. And so then I saw this crazy peer review, one of the peer reviewed journals. They talked about, they were using that same structure. They were saying when a man ejaculates in a woman, his semen in her body is a continuation of the patriarchy inside her. It's a perpetuation of the hierarchy inside the woman.
Yeah, it is.
And I kept thinking, you've got it. But if you say that's bad, it means people stop existing. Yeah, right. It means the world ceases to exist. It's like you should celebrate that because that's how you exist. It's nuts. I was like, my goodness, just turn it back on its feet, please.
Yeah. Let's return to a procreative, positive society. Jeez.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan.
It was good to meet you.
Yeah, I'm going to link your channel in the comments, and hope you get a trickle of more viewers. You're doing some excellent work.
All right, thanks, and keep in touch.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Careful of those snowbanks. So.
All right. Yeah, of course. All right.
Ciao.